Namaste. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Global Festival of Oneness, organized by Indica Moksha, celebrating the life and works of Adi Shankara. We will start with a prayer. Sadashiva Samarambham, Shankaracharya Madhyamam, Asmadacharya Paryantam, Vande Guru-Paramparam. We are very pleased to have with us Neema Majmudar, who will continue her sessions on Shankaracharya's Sadachara. Before we move on to the talk, I'd like to introduce the speaker. Neema Majmudar has a unique combination of personal background, international exposure, education, and depth of spiritual knowledge, which makes her an inspiring writer and teacher of Indian philosophy. She has studied Indian philosophy with Swami Dayananda Saraswati in the tradition of Adi Shankara. Neema ji has several years of experience as a professional with the UN in the fields of economic and social development. Since 1999, Neema ji has been giving conferences, conducting seminars and retreats across the world in the domain of personal development and philosophy. The seminars and retreats she conducts with her husband, Surya Tahora, incorporate concepts of Indian philosophy and Western psychology, ethics, and management. Together, they have created a bilingual website. They have created a bilingual website on the wisdom of Vedanta, and they have also co-authored the book Living the Vision of Oneness, which expounds the ways in which the vision of Bhagavad Gita and Veda can be utilized in daily life. Welcome, Neema ji, to our show.
Thank you very much, Anuradha ji. So, thank you. So, we continue today the text Sadachara Anusandhanam, and we are on verse number 12. Okay. This is as I told you, it's a very interesting book because the way Adi Shankaracharya ji has presented it. It can be seen as, things that a person needs to do in order to become adhikari for the knowledge, to become eligible for knowledge. And it can also be seen as contemplation on the final reality. So it's a very interesting combination. I will start with a prayer. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavadpadam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so the 12th verse is talking about Agnihotra. So let's read it. Atmani svaprakashagnau chittam eka ahutim kshipet Agnihotri vigneyaha cha itaraha namadharakaha. So basically, it is talking about the Agnihotra, which is generally done by a grahastha in the Vedic tradition. And what is the purpose of Agnihotra? Well, you offer oblations. And who do you offer oblations to? You propitiate all the devatas. So this is a wonderful thing in Vedic life, that we don't live in isolation. We are all connected. We are connected to the waters, we are connected to the sun, to the moon, to the air, and we do not just take their presence for granted. So, and what we understand is that these forces are not just physical forces, they are governed by the laws of Ishvara. So they are devas, and so we propitiate all these devatas, and we show our gratitude for a blessing for them, blessing us with life. And we also at times, you can ask for, their grace and their blessings. So this is a wonderful way to live your life every day, and reminding yourself that, you're living in a world where so many forces bless you continuously and unconditionally. So now, the ahuti, how do we offer our gratitude? Through offering things onto the fire. Fire is considered to be the vehicle which converts whatever you offer into subtle things which reach the devatas. So we offer to fire, and what do we offer? All the good things, right? So ghee, it is extremely sattvic thing to offer. So we offer all the best of the best to this fire and ask for gratitude. So now, in this verse, it is said that Agnihotra is wonderful, right? That definitely prepares you, makes you a mature human being, makes you a less conceited human being, makes you understand that, anything that you achieve is because of participation of so many different factors. So it makes you a humble human being. But here it is talked about, if you want to take it as a contemplation, then what is a contemplation? The ultimate, what do you, so Atmani Saprakashagno. So ultimately, where is the offering? So what the offering is to that one reality, which is manifesting as many. That's the only thing. Everything else is a reflected glory. So the final offering always goes to the truth, and that is what it happens to be, the self as Brahman, not the self that we think that we are, but our reality, which is Brahman. And what do we offer to this deity, which is Swaprakasha, which is self-effulgent, Atma, which is the truth of everything? We offer our Chittam. Chittam ahuti kshipet. So what does it mean? That you offer your mind to it. And that is so beautiful, because the mind can have so many different agendas, right? So mind can go after different things like money or different pleasures, or it can get caught in even spiritual practices, which are endless. They are very useful. They are endless. But what happens is, it's still the final truth of who you are is still covered for you. So this is why what we do is offer our mind to this final truth. And this is one thing that we always have to remind ourselves, that, the final pursuit in life, you can do anything, right? Because everything is nothing but manifestation of that reality. But you can't lose sight. The final commitment is only to the truth. And this is why we chant the prayers, Vedic prayers. They constantly remind you, Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. My final commitment in life is only what? To move away from Asat to the final Sat, so that this final Sat is shining in my intellect as clear as daylight. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. Well, anyway, that Atma is my true nature anyway. So how do I own up my true nature? tamasoma jyotirgamaya. The only way is to remove my ignorance, which makes me conclude that I am a small, insignificant human being, and own up my reality. So bring light of knowledge, which will take away the darkness of ignorance. And if I do that, what will happen? Mrityorma amrutam gamaya. So from life of becoming, life after life, what I will gain is my true nature, which is immortal, which is the final truth of everything. So this is my commitment. So what does it mean? To that Atma Agni Prakasha, which is my true nature. What is my ahuti, right? The imagery of Agnihotra is used, and what is said is that my mind I offer to that reality. So what does it mean? I give up my resistance to this knowledge, right? So I developed Shraddha in Shastra. And not only that, Shraddha is real when even when I listen to Shastra, right? I have to, mind is fanciful. It can create so many different ideas, oh, I'm the whole, I'm bigger. Many people say these kind of things, which is a little unfortunate, that I'm bigger than Ishvara. And so, these are things where, things are not totally and properly assimilated. So what does it mean? What Shastra is talking about is what Ishvara is showing you, that Ishvara Swarupa is same as your Swarupa. Where is the question of you being bigger than Ishvara? This knowledge, the author is Ishvara, and what you need to understand is first Ishvara and then its final reality, which is Satchidananda, which also happens to be your reality. So it's an equation. So all this is something to understand and assimilate it accurately. We need to offer our chittam to this knowledge, so that, that the proper understanding takes place, right? And we don't go with our fancies, but we listen to what Shastra has to say and assimilate it accurately. Now, verse number 13. Dehaha devalayaha proktaha dehi devaha niranjanaha architaha sarvabhavena svanubhutya virajate. So here, what needs to be understood is I am Satchidananda Atma. And very often, Vedanta begins, and very many texts begin like that. The teachers talk about that I am not the body. Obviously, in order to recognize I am Jagat Karana Brahma, you have to understand that this body is something that I'm just connected to it for a time being, but that is not my final identity. But what is interesting is you can put it in two different ways. One is you can say, I'm not the body. That's one way of saying it. But here, Adi Shankaracharya ji is brilliant. And what does he say? Is instead of just saying I'm not the body, what he says is Dehaha Devalayaha. So what does it mean? In this body abides Deva. And what is this Deva? Either you can take it as Ishvara, or you can take it as the final reality. So what does it mean? This Dehi Devaha Niranjanaha. So what does it mean? Who Dehaha Asya Asti Iti Dehi. The one who has this body for a length of time is Dehi. And who is that Dehi? The ultimate reality, which is Satchidananda Atma. So now what we do need to do is little bit of analysis to understand how, right? So what we understand is that I am the body, but according to the Vedas, this body is made up of 5 elements. What are the 5 elements? Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apaha, and Prithvi. But if you really look at it, right, suppose I give you a little bit of water and give you a little bit of earth. Can anybody create a body? No. So that means these 5 elements are put together intelligently. And what is that intelligence which has put together all the 5 elements, this is what we call Ishvara. Ishvara, which first manifests 5 elements and combines these 5 elements with different permutations and combinations, that sometimes it becomes sun, sometimes moon, sometimes plant kingdom, sometimes animals, birds, aquatic creatures, humans, all the celestial beings, all these are play on these 5 elements. So where any form is, that's exactly where Ishvara's intelligence is. There are billions of cells in this body, and we don't even know which cells come and which cell go. They don't remain constant. They keep coming and going. And there is a tremendous intelligence which puts all these cells together and makes them into different organs and make this body an intelligent creation which can perform a certain function. So that means where my body is, that's exactly where Ishvara is. And where Ishvara is, the truth of Ishvara has to be there. So what is truth of Ishvara? The intelligence requires what consciousness. So suppose I ask you, what is more fundamental, intelligence or consciousness? Definitely consciousness is more fundamental, because in consciousness, has to precede intelligence. So this is why Swarupa of Ishvara, which is Sarvajnaha, Sarvashaktiman, is Sat and Chit. So this is why where Ishvara, where my body is, that's exactly where Ishvara is. Where Ishvara is, this is exactly where the truth of Ishvara, which is Satchidananda Atma, is. So suppose I ask myself, who am I, right? So that means your essential nature, Dehi's essential nature, is the same Satchidananda, because there is only one final reality from which every form has come. So this is why you can look upon your Deha as a place where both Ishvara abides and also the final truth, which is Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, that abides, which is your essential reality. So Archita Sarva Bhavena Svanubhutya Virajate. So that means when, so if that is the case, then instead of just negating body, I'm not the body, and trying to disassociate with body, you will have what? A reverential attitude towards this body. Why would you have reverential attitude towards this body? Because in order to remove ignorance, you need an appropriate body. So this is why Manushya Janma is supposed to be an extremely exalted birth, not because we don't have challenges. We have very many challenges, but that is the birth in which you are given the capacity to remove the ignorance. So this is why instead of negating, your association with Deha, what we do is change our attitude and understand that, hey, in this Deha, what the final truth abides, and I have an opportunity through this body to figure out my true nature. So everything becomes reverential. So this is why in our culture, what we do is we put tika on our forehead, and that tika reminds us that, of course, it's not only about seeing divinity everywhere, but you can't forget yourself, and you have to remind yourself every day that, this body is also manifestation of Ishvara. So this is something which is lovely, because a person who is constantly trying to dissociate with one's body cannot understand the reality. The person has to acknowledge the presence of the body and also see it as a blessing from Ishvara, through which this final reality can be figured out. So this is why there is what reverential attitude towards this body. Then the next verse is number 14. Mauna swadhyayanam dhyanam dhyayam brahma anuchintanam gnanena iti tayoho Samyak Nishedhat Tattva Darshanam. So here, there are certain practices which are very much required in order for us to grow as a human being, to become eligible for knowledge. So what are they? They are what we call mauna. Mauna means mind is full of chatters. In 5 minutes, the mind can go from one thing to the other and can go across the world. And it is fanciful. So we do our thinking through association. So from one thing to the other, we can go and we can get totally distracted. So this is why certain amount of quietude, familiarizing yourself with certain silence, which is it is something which is between two thoughts. In fact, there is always silence between thoughts, but that silence is so short that we don't even come to touch with it. But the more we get in touch with that silence, what happens is there is certain inner space that is developed with reference to our thought life. Otherwise, what happens is we think I am as good as my thoughts. But the minute I begin to observe the silence and see that before the thought arises, there is silence. After the thought goes, there is silence. Before the next thought comes. And that is my inner space within which what it gives me the capacity to master my thoughts. If the thoughts come which are not really desirable, then what happens? If I'm familiar with this inner silence, I'm able to check and I'm able to mold my thoughts differently, right? So these are important practices. Swadhyayanam is also the study of the Vedas and listening to the truth again and again. Dhyanam, meditation. Meditation, according to our tradition, the definition is Saguna Brahma Vishaya Manasa Vyapara. So meditation for Vedanta is not just keeping quiet and just keeping silence, but it is also relating to Ishvara. We are not used to seeing the whole universe as manifestation of Ishvara. Therefore, our relationship with the world itself is slightly problematic. We see it as at times unfair. We see it as random at times. Sometimes we struggle with the world, and we need to, re-understand our relationship with the world by understanding that the world is nothing but Ishvara, and Ishvara, it pervades the entire creation. So this is what Dhyanam, when I'm absorbed, in meditation, then what happens is my dhyayam initially is Ishvara and connection to Ishvara. In that connection, I grow up as an individual. In that connection, I give up all my resistance. I give up all my guilt, my hurt, and this is what Swamiji used to say, I settle account with the world. World is no longer a problem. I see it only as a blessing. And then what happens is, when the mind is resolved like that, then the knowledge takes place. And once the knowledge takes place, tayoho samyak nishedhat tattva darshanam. So what does it mean? What it means is, once the knowledge takes place, one understands the relativity of all these practices. It's not that these practices are not useful. The practices were useful, but they what led the person to this knowledge, and they have done their job. So they have done their job. So they are no longer of any relevance to the wise person, because he has used these practices to become eligible. And now the person is completely clear about one's identity. So this is why there is a negation. Doesn't mean that you totally negate these practices, but they are of no relevance to the wise person, because he has crossed. He has moved from ignorance, the paradigm of ignorance, to the clarity of knowledge. Verse number 15. Now, for this person who is a wise person, what is his or her attitude towards the world is explained. Atita anagatam kinchita nasmarami chintaye ragadvesha vina praptam bhujami shubha ashubham. Okay. Now, generally, what are we caught with? So, a normal individual, in fact, many people say that we never actually live in the present. Either we are thinking about the past, and unfortunately, the past means many events have happened in our life, but we won't very often hold on to hurt, right? And so what people have done to us, or things that happen that we find difficult for us. So we keep ruminating on that, right? And that is a common human behavior. And the other thing that we do very often is think about the future. So we constantly, think about what will happen, future scenarios, things which have not yet happened. We sometimes, have through our mind, we think that, oh, that may happen to me, and then our mind is caught in fear. So we are never actually present in the reality. So the wise person, for the wise person, these problems do not exist. So the past is, of course, memory is there. Memory, nobody can totally eradicate, right? The memory is going to remain. It's very essential. The fact that I'm able to talk about these classes means I still remember what I had studied. So memory is absolutely required. But the memory, which is a kind of a destructive in the sense that it's just ruminating, it doesn't make us move forward. Those kind of, things have gone away. Memory is just for, functional memory, which is very much required. So, and future, one has trust in the world. Why is there a trust in the world? Because ultimately everything is a play on the final reality. But even the empirical reality is what governed by infallible laws of Ishvara. Infallible laws of Ishvara means that the world is not just random, it is very intelligently put together. And so therefore, nothing that is going to happen to me or anybody else is going to be unfair. And that is what we call trusting life. So this is why the person understands the order of Ishvara, and therefore there is no anxiety about the future, right? And then what about the present? The present also we look through our own raga dvesha. What is raga dvesha? Raga is something that I like, which is binding me. I want things to be absolutely this way because I think it is right. And dvesha is something that I want to avoid. So even the present, we are not totally at ease because we are constantly trying to manipulate the world to suit our needs, suit our desires. And therefore, we are always anxious. And, world is vast. And we are, suppose if you think you are one individual, your capacity to manipulate everything to suit your needs is something which is very limited. So you're always going to be stressed. So these kind of stress doesn't exist for a wise person because what the person, is able to take Shubha and Ashubha, whatever comes on one's stride without much resistance, because the person does not depend upon the world to satisfy oneself. One has understood that I am the truth of everything. I am the independent reality. The entire universe depends upon me. And if that is my reality, then I don't need to rely on few small things happening my way for my fulfillment. So this is what the wise person is, the attitude towards the past, the future, and even the present. So life begins to flow. Life begins to flow. And this is why very often they say that Ishvara works through that person, because the person doesn't have one's own agenda. Then Ishvara uses the wise person to accomplish a few things with reference to sharing and imparting this knowledge and making it available to humanity. So this is how the wise person is described. Verse number 16. Abhayam sarva bhutanam jnanam ahuhu manishinaha nijanande spruha na anye vairagyasya avadhihi mata. Okay, now here it's something which is also very interesting, that there is a beautiful saying, which is Dvaitat Bhayam Bhavati. So what, the minute you create a distinction, what kind of a distinction? Jiva Jiva Bheda, Jiva Jagat Bheda, Jiva Ishvara Bheda. So if you think that this division is real, so what, I am one individual separate from other individual. I am this individual's and world is external to me. I am this individual and Ishvara is external to me. So then what? A bhaya is inevitable, right? So the minute there is Dvaita, there is bhaya. Now, because the person understands that all that is here is one, which is manifesting as many, for that person, what happens? Abhayam. And so there is no bhayam for that person. And if that person has no longer any demands on the world, and the person is no longer competing with anybody for anything, the person has accomplished what one has to accomplish. One has understood the truth. So therefore, what, the person is a non-competitor. As the person is non-competitor, then what? Abhayam sarva bhutana. Not only the person doesn't have fear, but the person doesn't give fear to people around. So this is why they say that in sannyasa ritual, one thing that is a very essential part of the ritual is abhaya pradana. So what does it mean? You declare to all the beings and say that I'm a non-competitor. The only goal I have right now is only to know the truth and to share the truth. So I'm non-competitor. So you give abhaya to it. And that's why you take ahimsa. Wow, that I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm going to be, that is my utmost, value. And I don't compete even with Indra, right, for the position. And because I'm only interested in knowledge. So that means even to other bhutas, other beings, you are not source of any fear, right? And what the person, why is the person not a competitor? Does it mean that the person has no aspirations in life and is just kind of passive and not doing anything? So here he says, Nijanande Spruha. So the person does have commitment, but where is the commitment? Only in knowing one's true nature. So that means life is dedicated. It's not a lazy life. It is a life of dedication to the final truth and pursuing this truth and sharing this truth. Swadhyaya and pravachana. This is what Taittiriya Upanishad says. This is a life of a jignasu, that to study and share, right? And when that is your top priority, then what happens? Vairagya. Vairagya towards everything else. Vairagya doesn't mean that you reject everything. Vairagya means you see the world and all the objects in the world. So Vairagya literally means Vigataha Ragaha Yasmat. So what does it mean? So generally we see the objects in the world through a certain color. And what is the color? Our own superimposition that this object will fulfill me. this person I need absolutely for my happiness. So that means we have added our superimposition. So, and because we have added our superimposition, this object becomes critical for us. And we think that because we think without it, we can't be fulfilled. So this wise person has understood that no object in this universe is able to give you the fulfillment that you are searching for. The fulfillment comes from knowing Atma is the whole, and everything else depends upon Atma. So for this person, naturally, what the whole that the objects have over other people, there is no longer, that doesn't exist. So the person is free from the hold of objects, and the person gets the freedom. And it's not that the person is not interested, but the person gets the final fulfillment from knowing one's true nature, and the person is able to freely in this world and give. A person is fearless, it gives fearlessness to everybody around. Verse number 17. How does one become wise, right? So that is answered in verse number 17. Vedanta Shravanam Kuryat Mananam Cha Upapattibihi Yogena Abhyasanam Nityam Tataha Darshanam Atmanah. So what is required to be a wise person? Vedanta Shravanam Kuryat. So what Vedanta, which includes Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Prakarana Granthas, Brahma Sutra, these are the text of Vedanta. And what happens, how does one become wise? Listen to what the Shruti has to say, or what Smriti has to say again and again. Again and again, listen to it. And that discipline is required. So as we have, it will show in the sometime later that there is this thing about three things, which is what we call pramana pravritti. What are the three things? Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. Shravanam is listening to Shastra, but it's not just listening, it is what we call Tatparya Nishchaya. Not only you listen to Shastra, but you try to ascertain what is the vision of Shastra. Is it talking about me being part of the whole? Is it talking about me being whole? Is it talking about me being greater than Ishvara, me being one with Ishvara? What is it talking about? So that is what we call Tatparya Nishchaya. So that is a very big part of Shravanam. Then Mananam is, suppose I understand what Shastra is talking about, then I have to, my mind definitely can have many doubts, and I have to pay attention to those doubts and resolve the doubts. So that is Mananam, and Nididhyasanam is contemplation. So this is something which is required, right, for a length of time before the knowledge takes place. And this is something which I want to point out, that the traditional Vedanta is a pursuit, right? It's a pursuit, and it's a lifelong pursuit. And sometimes it is considered to be multiple life pursuit. And these days, people kind of, have heard this Tattvamasi once or twice, and people think, oh yeah, I'm the whole, and they as though pretend that I am the everything and I'm free from the mind. And that is not really the traditional Vedanta is something which is serious, and it requires a lot of clarity, right? And a lot of time which is spent on reflection and contemplation. So this is something that, and this is why a sannyasi dedicates one's life to this pursuit of this knowledge, swadhyaya and pravachana. So here that is required. And the second thing is what? Yoga, yoga. Here yoga does not mean Of course, it could mean the asanas that we do, but it also means karma yoga and everything else that you do to prepare your mind for the knowledge. So if you look at Bhagavad Gita, it talks about the few things, throughout the Bhagavad Gita. It talks about growth in terms of values, in terms of your attitude towards action, your attitude towards result of the action, your relationship with desires, so it is something, your relationship with Ishvara. So all this, your devotion, bhakti. So all of this needs to be cultivated, and one needs to work on that also. So that means these are the two aspects. One is called pramana pravritti, which is shravana, manana, and nididhyasana, and the other is your relative growth as an individual. Both are initiated by the person in order to gain this knowledge. Okay, verse number 18. Shabda shaktehe achintyatvat shabdat eva aparokshadhihi prasuptaha purushaha yatvat shabdena eva avabudhyate. Okay. So this is something which is very important. Now, one can ask this question. Shravana means listening to the Shastra, and Shastras are in form of words. And one can say that how can words, which are just mere words, how can they give knowledge, right? So there is a popular belief that words only can give indirect knowledge. So it is only intellectual knowledge. Then you have to realize Atma. And for that, you need to do meditation and to make it what, sakshatkara, they call it. And they say that, then it has to become direct knowledge. It is only intellectual knowledge, then it has to be made direct knowledge. And this idea is negated in this verse by saying Shabda Shaktihi. Shabda Shaktihi means these are not ordinary words. These are words of pramana. And pramana means they are Shruti words, and they are words of what the rishis are mantra drushtaraha. They are only the seers of these mantras. The author is only Ishvara. So that means these words are potent words. What can they do? Well, what can words do? Well, the words can, Atma is Swatah Siddha. So Atma doesn't need to be produced. Atma is already self-shining, and it is all pervasive, and it is the truth of everything. It is Sachidananda Atma. But that reality is covered because of ignorance. So through this shabdas of Shruti, what the mind, what listens to these words and undertakes an inquiry, and if the mind captures the meaning of the words accurately, then the words are so powerful. What can they do? They can remove the ignorance, and Atma doesn't need to be produced. Atma shines in its own glory, and there is not a trace of ignorance which remains for the wise person. So this is why what the Shastra and the words of Shastra don't give indirect knowledge, or it doesn't give theoretical knowledge. That's why we call Shastra as Pramana. Shastra as Pramana means it is capable of removing your ignorance and making you own up your true nature. And this is why it can totally remove all the ignorance that that covers reality. So an example is given that the sun is always bright and shining. So what? The clouds cover it, but clouds don't really cover it, because the clouds themselves are seen by you because of the sun. Otherwise, you can't even see the clouds. But if the clouds go, what happens is the sun was always shining, but you can see it clearly. Similarly, Atma is self-shining. It is the only reality which doesn't undergo any change, upon which everything exists, and that is always present. The ignorance goes away when one exposes oneself to Shastra Pramana. Number 19. Atma anatma vivekena jnanam bhavati nishchalam guruna bodhitaha shishyaha shabda brahma ativartate. Beautiful. So suppose you can say, yeah, there is Shastra, but how is Shastra going to reveal itself to you? So this is why they say you need Guru. The person who has gone, who is this Guru? The Guru was once a Shishya, went to a Guru, came to know the truth, and now has become a Guru. Now what that Guru can again teach another Shishya. So this is why, this is what we call Guru Shishya Parampara. Guru Shishya Parampara is important because here we have to understand something which is not just a given thing, but the truth of everything. And the person has to be led, and Shabda Pramana, which is Shastra, has to be handled. So this is why one needs Guru. Guruna bodhitaha shishyaha. Then what happens? Shabda Brahma ativartate. So what happens when the Shishya understands the words of Shastra? What takes place? Atma anatma viveka. Atma anatma viveka means what is Atma, what is my true nature, and what is my incidental nature, where I just have a connection to a given body and a given mind for a length of time. And that also, as I told you, is a blessing, because through this body and mind, I can expose myself to Shastra and I can remove the ignorance. So body is a blessing to me, without which the ignorance cannot go. And so this is why. So, but what still, Atma is Atma is not the body, but body is not separate from Atma. So Atma and Anatma, one has to understand that while body is not independent of Atma, because every object comes from the final reality, but final reality is none of the objects. So this is why, this is what we call Atma, Anatma, Viveka. And later on, what happens? Shabda Brahma Ativartate. Ultimately, right, what happens is the words have served their meaning and the person gets the meaning. So ultimately, the words themselves belong to empirical reality, right? So Guru belongs to the person who's teaching you has empirical reality. Shishya, who's learning, has an empirical reality. The Pramana is Shastra Pramana, and Vedas are the Pramana, and the words of the Vedas are doing their job. All of this is happening within empirical truth. And through this operation, what happens? Suppose the person understands the final reality, then that final reality doesn't belong to empirical reality. It is Paramarthika. It is the ultimate truth. And the person, this is what we call a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift means it's also used something called transcendence. But transcendence doesn't mean you go up. It only means that you get to know the final truth. You are able to distinguish between what is empirical and what is the absolute reality. So this is what, so then the words themselves have done their job, and the words also belong to the empirical reality, and the final reality is what? Just this final truth, which is without any forms, without any attributes, which is from which everything else is done. So here, so what does the person understand? So what the person understands is said in verse number 20. Natvam dehaha na indriyani na pranaha na manaha na dihi vikaritvat vinashitvat drushyatvat ghataha yatha. Okay, so the person, as I told you, understands there are few places where we make a mistake, and that I am as good as the body, I'm as good as the capacity of my senses. Nobody says I'm as good as the capacity of my senses, but we often say, oh, I'm going blind, right? Or I'm going deaf. So that is what it means, that I am connected to the capacity of the senses, and also prana. Prana means what all of us have feared that one day we will go. And that is, again, our connection with prana and mind and intellect. So this is our identity. When we are within the paradigm of ignorance, our identity is this individuality, which is body, mind, senses, intellect, and prana. And what happens? The wise person knows that this is not my truth. Why? Because all these things are vikara, vikaravan. Vikaravan means they're all undergoing change. The body is undergoing change. The capacity of my senses is undergoing change. The mind and its thoughts are changing. The intellect also changes, from child where I don't know anything. I know, then suppose I become old, my memory fails me. As many things I had understood, I don't remember anymore. So that also undergoes change. And I am the one in whose presence all these changes are taking place, right? So that means the person understands that I am distinct from all this. But what is key is what they are not distinct from me. Because if Atma was totally distinct from everything else, there cannot be non-duality. Non-duality means that Atma is distinct, but they are not distinct from Atma. If I look into the body resolves in Atma, because as I told you, body is nothing but 5 elements. 5 elements are put together by Ishvara, where Ishvara is, the truth of Ishvara is, which is Satyam Dhanam Anantam Brahma. So body resolves in Atma, mind resolves in Atma, Indriyas resolve in Atma, and Atma is independent. So this is like, in case of the example that while the ring is non-separate from gold, gold is independent of being ring. Gold can be melted and made into an earring. Gold doesn't have any form. So this is what we call Satya-Mithya relationship, that the empirical world has a dependent reality on Satyam Dhanam Anantam Brahma, and Satyam Dhanam Anantam Brahma as an independent reality. It doesn't depend upon the world. It is Satyam. And the Jagat is Mithya. Mithya does not mean that it is unreal. It means that it has this empirical reality. 21. Do I have time or do I have to stop?
You can take one more and then we will stop.
Okay, great. Vishuddham kevalam jnanam nirvishesham niranjanam yat ekam paramanandam tattvam asya advayam param. Okay, so tattvam asi advayam param. Now, this is something which is interesting. Suppose I come to know that I am, right, this existence which is of the nature of consciousness. In my presence, the body and its changing conditions, mind and its changing conditions, intellect and its changing conditions are known, then what still happens is you still may think that you are this consciousness which is individual to you. But Vedanta, right, we are not talking about individual Atma. We are talking about this one universal truth. And what is this one? So just as my true nature is consciousness, every vikara has its true nature as consciousness. Vikara depends upon this consciousness. Consciousness is independent of all vikaras, whether it is my body or fish's body or a bird's body or another human being's body. That is all dependent reality. There is only one independent reality upon which all these different vikaras exist. So that becomes what? My Swarupa is Advayam. So my true nature, the consciousness which seems to be confined to me, has something which is particular to me, is not just individual, it is universal. And this is why this is Paramanandam Tattvam, Tattvam Asi Advayam Param. So you are the truth of everything, and that is what is to be understood. And this is what the wise person understands. So Madatma Sarva Bhutatma, right? So my Atma is the Atma of everyone. There is only one Atma, right? And everything else is Anatma. Yeah, and what is Anatma is all the bodies and all the insentient things that exist in this universe. Anatma is dependent upon Atma for its existence, and Atma is independent of everything. This is what makes it Advaya, right? Advaita, right? So there is no second. So this is what is explained in verse number 21, and then I will explain number 22 onwards next time.
Thank you so much, Neema ji. This is really a wonderful text, how it weaves in daily practices into the vision of Advaita Vedanta. We are really grateful that you are sharing these with us. We have a few questions and I'll take some of them. One of the questions is that I think Mahesh ji is asking, is that only 1 in a million achieve this, understand this knowledge? So how does this knowledge actually help common people?
That's a good question, but I'm very happy that the Maheshi at least understands it. 1 in million understand it. So nowadays it's like everybody pretends as though, oh, I know the truth, but it's true that it's not accessible. But now imagine the pursuit starts. Now the pursuit starts means everything changes in your life. So this is why how does the pursuit start? When you first begin to understand that things of the world are not giving me what I'm looking for. So that itself is a very big step, right? Then the second step is in the pursuit. The second step is what will then give me what I'm looking for? And that is what understanding that Atma Vichara will give me that. So even if you go to that, then what happens that in this, living in this world, what happens is you begin to be seeker of knowledge. And the minute Shastra enters your buddhi, everything changes. So even if you are not one of those million who understands, the transformation starts. The transformation starts. Everything which was all skewed, thinking that you are a small, insignificant individual, then you depend upon so many different objects for your fulfillment. When things don't happen your way, then you have frustration, you have anger. All those things begin to change. All those things begin to change. Ishvara and understanding of Ishvara enters your life, and truth enters your life. So there is a beautiful journey. There is a beautiful journey. So that means you can change the way you live your daily life before you become a jnana. And that's why as many people as this Indica Moksha is doing a great service in making this knowledge available to so many people. It will change them forever. Even if they are not everybody becomes a jnani, but their life trajectory changes once and for all. There is no going back anymore.
We have one last question, which is from Sanjeevendra ji. To what extent can listening systematically to one's guru's pravachan on YouTube be an approximation to a live guru?
Yeah, that's true. But one thing is very true that, especially since COVID, everything has gone online. And online is a great platform because, somebody can be sitting in India in one town, and the teacher can be in some other town, and they can still learn. And that is possible. So I don't want to devalue this online learning. But it is true that nowadays what happens is people listen to many different people, and it's almost like FOMO. I don't want to miss out who is saying what, and then many ideas are there, and there is no systematic. This teaching is a leading methodology. The teacher has to work with you till the time that you see the truth. And that requires a little commitment and a relationship with one teacher. So even if it is online, as long as it is not just, tuning on to anything and everything and just absorbing and making one whole big khichdi out of it, it can work online, provided it's a proper study with one teacher and it is done systematically.
Thank you so much, Neema ji. We look forward to next Saturday for one more session. Viewers, we have many such sessions. As Neema ji said, that Indica Moksha is doing a great job in changing our trajectory of thinking, our outlook. So please listen to more sessions. We have many such sessions till the middle of this month. Tomorrow morning, we are having Shankara Charitam, a modern retelling by Ramesh Venkatraman. This is also one of the series lecture. So see you tomorrow at 7 a.m. India time. Good night and namaste.